7th. This is a special meeting, a study session involving the comprehensive plan. And if we could have a roll call, please.
Mr. Buckenstedt.
Here.
Commissioner Brown.
Here.
Commissioner Coronado.
Here.
Commissioner Iteraria. Commissioner Newfinke.
Here.
Commissioner Metcalf.
Here.
Commissioner Ranville.
Here.
Commissioner Samuelson. Mr. Trevopoulos.
And I did hear from Pavlos. He said that he was going to be en route from Boulder and with luck would be here around 7:30. So I told him to drive carefully. So we do have a quorum. We've got a draft agenda in front of us, several items, including going back.
Yeah, but if you didn't get it in mail today.
It was emailed late.
Emailed
I've
late,
got it in front of me. Now.
Oh, I got more.
You need one?
Coming this way, too.
Okay.
Oh.
There's 6 items, it looks like. Is there any suggested revisions or additions, subtractions from the agenda? Seeing none suggested. Oh, Linda, yes.
I'd like to talk about the process for a little bit longer than 5 minutes,
Okay.
if that's possible,
Okay.
maybe 10,
You would do that at the beginning or the end?
the beginning.
Beginning?
That's our next item. So if there's no objection to that, let's add to that. We have an adjournment at 8:20 if we're so fortunate. So perhaps we don't need to put a time limit on it. If you have some ideas about the process, since this is your idea, let's just go right into it.
Okay, what I was thinking of is more of a formal timeline so that we know at each meeting we're going to do this. At the following meetings, we're going to do that because, I mean, right now, what we have to do is get our comments from all of the planning commissioners on the latest draft, and we have to review those comments and then review the comp plan against, the city council direction and review the comp plan against those cases like Merle's and Nevada Place, and then maybe assess making revisions to that, and then update, and Civitas is also doing a review, maybe an update and presentation of their review, and then also, after that, we'll have to review the updates to the updates, and then make modifications, and then plan for the presentation to the public, and then conduct the public hearing, and revise the draft based on the input from the public hearing. And then we need to review the updates as a whole commission and then finally accept the actual plan and then develop a plan to present to city council and then present to city council. So that's a lot of tasks that, to me, have to be done. And if we can lay it out and then set some dates to it, then we will know, we'll have a good idea of when we can get this done. I don't know what you guys think about that idea.
We've had timelines in the past and had difficulty keeping to them. I'm willing to try to push to finish everything every time if you guys want to do that. We, of course, last time, for example, got to 3 out of the 5 questions, and so sometimes things get held over. But commissioners, how do you want to proceed? Craig?
I would say in earlier timelines, we really didn't have, at least myself, didn't have a really good feel of, the exact steps that needed to take place to get this done. I think we're close enough now, and Linda has, I think, outlined it very clearly. There's some very specific tasks that we know, and we probably could put an amount of time on each of those and outline.
It almost might be easiest, and see what you think, if we work backwards in terms of here's where we know where we want to be. We want to be at City Council for public hearing and adoption, right? And then work back from that, because the second major thing we know is the Planning Commission, public hearing, and then what we do with that in terms of, okay, does that make sense?
Sure. Okay. Do you, not remembering every step that you listed, but I think you covered them all. Do you want to have Dennis try to
Sure.
fill those in
Some of those can
between
be
those
done
major
concurrently.
pieces.
Right,
So-
totally.
Okay. Maybe if you list them for Dennis. Because I'm not sure what's doable, so.
Right, and I'm not sure either.
Just interject one other thing. We talked about skipping next week's meeting, which is Valentine's Day, in favor of the 21st. And the 21st is not a day that can be broadcast. The city has that day off, being President's Day. So keep that in mind, perhaps, for the schedule for the balance of this month.
Great, thanks. So the biggie is the public hearing before City Council. That's where we get ratification, right? What that means is Planning Commission has the authority to actually adopt the plan. So this is adoption. And then it goes forward to City Council, and they do ratification of that. And the theory is that if the City Council is really going to use the plan, you need to make sure they're on board as well. And so even though you have the power of adoption, they need to go through and say, yes, we agree with that. So there's a process beyond this. But this is the big one, the public hearing. So the question is, what do you want to do to get before that, and what do you want to do after that? Typically what you're going to do is you're going to have public comments here. You're going to go back and do another draft. You're going to do revisions. So you're doing revisions to the draft after that. And then you're going to have to go through and approve those and say, yes, that's what we really heard and that's what we agree to. So then you reprint that draft plan and go back here to public hearing again. You can't do it a couple different ways. Typically, I think, given the fact that you've got the public hearing here, most of the process really should be here in terms of you have done the public outreach. You're the one that really is doing the most of the work. By the time it gets to City Council, they're going to know that you've incorporated those comments, and what they're getting is pretty much a finished document. Would be so they, I would think, would not be hoping to see a draft come before them that they're going to have to revise again at some point. Say, we heard things different than what you heard initially. So this is where the major public comments are going to come in, and this is where the major revisions will come in as well. Thanks, Suzanne. So what we have now is we've got a draft that we're adding additional comments to. We're going to answer these questions tonight. We would like to have that be, for this draft at least, knowing that we're going to have additional public process and additional revisions up here, this is where we'd like to say this is it for now. We're really going to cut it and say, yeah, we're happy. We don't agree with everything in here. We know we've got issues among us in terms of how the policies are coming out. But as a body, we say this is our plan. This is our draft plan that we want to take forward. So comments tonight, and then additional revisions that we will make, and then a final draft that we bring back to you. Okay. Yes, Dave.
What are the minimums between our public hearing and adoption and giving notice for the City Council's public hearing? Or for that matter, a minimum notice before we can have our public hearing?
Sure.
What are the minimums?
I think, is it 2 weeks, Suzanne, on that, or is it 30 days for the notification? Do you remember?
On a
Comp plan?
I don't know, I'll have to look at that.
Yeah, we'll have to look. Yeah, I'm not sure what it is. I mean, it's partially legal and partially what does make sense, I think, in terms of public notification, getting the word out. And that's probably, I think, in our minds, I think, more critical than what the minimum might be in terms of what's there. But it's easier, I think safely you'd say 30 days, typically, to get the notice out, get notification on, and then we need to think about how much outreach do you want to do in here, and who do you want to do it to, and what's the forum for doing that. We've had some discussion that we thought, with the kind of comments we've been getting, that we would go directly to public hearing and have that rather than doing it presentations. But we've always said we wanted to have this final draft online, available to people for review, so by the time they get to this public hearing, they've got their comments in line, and they know what they want to say at that point. They've had an opportunity. That might include, for example, a presentation to the to the Downtown Merchants Association, Hoodlum. You might want to go and actually do a PowerPoint for them to, here's what's in the plan, here's what it means. So they've really got a good sense of what that would be. So that would be in this area here before you go here. And it'll be online here. Copies here. All that goes on during that notification period. So if we're saying 30 days, when you sign off on this final draft, and when we have the public hearing, so if we sign off on this, say, and the next meeting we're having is the 28th, possibly, we might have one on the 14th, the odds are we won't have the changes made in a week and out to you in a week. We've got a week between now and then. So if we really want to get the changes made, we thought we could get them made by the 22nd, and then get those out to you on the 22nd. So you'd have almost a week to review those before the meeting on the 28th. So you'd have a week to review those before, came back and made a review of that final draft, signed off on it, and then got it ready to go to public hearing. So.
And I see with the final draft that we'll have a couple iterations in that, in that you're looking at Civitas doing a review, and then...
That should come in the same here, yeah. We'll have
But
that
would the
before
Planning
20th.
Commission have the opportunity to get a presentation from Civitas and also...
No, I think what we would do,
Could incorporate what we thought worked, because they're going to be looking at process. They're not
yeah,
gonna look
it's going to be real basic stuff, so it won't be policy.
at- In the draft you get,
Okay.
so it'll be all done.
Yeah. So we'll have incorporated that into this draft on the 22nd that you're getting. So we'll have gotten the kind of peer review at that point. So,
Let me try to throw one other anchor out there. We kind of got back and we're working from the front. If it was the hearing for city council to be published in the Littleton report, I think we just had one come out. They come out every other month. So when would that be to get that published? So that's,
it's a month before it comes out, typically, is what you need it to have it in there.
Okay.
So if we had one that just came out for February, right? So January, February that came out. I remember.
I think
it was February.
I got it
I think it's February.
Is it February
So
issue?
the
Okay.
first week in March, we'd need to have, our article in there or a supplement in there where we wanted to have in there in terms of here's what the downtown plan is saying. So
Do we want to use that as an anchor to anchor this process and then work back from there to say, Jenny is nodding yes, to say that's when that will occur? That would wrap up sort of with the current group of commissioners sending it to city council, not present.
because that means that doesn't come out till April, so you don't have your public hearing until April.
Well, I
That
meant
comes out.
public hearing for council,
Oh, for council.
for council, not for us. Yeah.
The only question I would have is if comments here are dramatic enough, you need to do some fairly significant changes. Are you comfortable setting this date, not knowing what you're getting here?
Well, and that's part of my question was, can we set that anchor? But if we announce that in the little report, a month ahead of time, that it's going to city council, then that, I guess I kind of like the idea that that forces us to get it sorted out. And if we have to add a meeting or two or three, or however we accomplish that in March,
Picking up on what you were alluding to, if we don't have the public hearing the end of March, last week or whatever, then we're going to have a substantial turnover in planning commission.
you've got different commissioners.
Yeah.
So I would like to have had our hearing earlier in March rather than later. This current, I'll call it, crop of commissioners
Right.
address the comments from the public hearing, and then it goes on to council.
Right.
Is this making any sense? And I sort of like the constraint of, okay, if we're going to keep talking about it, we're going we're going to meet constantly in March, but by golly, we'll get those revisions. And you tell us that Civitas is only in process and minimal.
It really, yeah, they'd be looking just at, do they see anything that is just
Unworkable.
live or die, basically, totally unworkable,
And
yeah.
then we
So-
can vote up and down, to force us to.
And they wouldn't be affecting policy, they'd really be looking at how's it working, so, any inconsistencies, that type of stuff, too.
But assuming we're going to have this out for people to look at before they come to the hearing, unlike some of us, well, that really means we've got to get this thing mostly to where we want it by the 28th of this month.
Right.
And I'm not sure that we can do that, because if we get the draft on the 22nd, if we have, substantial changes, which could possibly be, because that would be the first time we're really seeing the entire draft incorporated.
And that-
I was curious, as far as having it all completely in a PDF with graphics, is that, where does that fall in the final draft that we're looking at? Will that,
Realistically, I think we wait till out here, probably, to get the absolutely final document, because it's just,
I was
things
just
move
curious.
around, yeah, I think. And we'll have something that works very well up in here, but actually, the final document would be probably out here. Sarah Jane, does that sound right? So,
So what you're telling us you'll bring back on the 22nd doesn't have the pictures,
right.
and
We could include, like we did before, we could include a couple of pages of pictures, but they
Right.
just wouldn't be placed.
okay, but that is the final form then, and revises based on these questions that we're going to get to here shortly,
Right.
which is the final set of questions.
Suzanne, did you find it? I don't remember. I was thinking it was 30, but I'm not sure.
It just says you have to publish it in the newspaper within the city and within the county.
Okay, doesn't have a date? Okay. So I think it's more just in terms of what seems reasonable in terms of how much notice and getting the word out to people as to what it would be then. So that gives us some flexibility.
Commissioners, have we got, first let me go to Linda, have we got the steps that you had in mind here, or
Are we missing something?
is the water muddied?
Well, some of the issues to me is that to plan for the public hearing and plan for what is going to be presented, I mean, that takes a lot of work, and I'm not sure if that's what staff's going to do, and the same thing with planning for city council.
Typically, yeah, it's most effective if Planning Commission does a lot of the presentation. We can certainly do part of it, but I think historically, my experience has been if Planning Commission, this is your plan, to the extent you can take different chapters, you can take different recommendations, you can take different concepts, whatever it might be in terms of how it's presented, it comes from you. We can certainly work with you in terms of what's the organization, what are the graphics, what do you need for it, but yeah.
Okay.
Are we planning this hearing as a sales pitch? I mean, are we going to make a big elaborate presentation, or are we going to put the draft out there and say, this is 95% of where we think we want to be, explain the steps of going to city council, and then take questions, get feedback, get reaction, so that along with what we get from Civitas and staff, we then have a body of information to try and incorporate into the final that we take to city council? I mean, I wasn't thinking a big, long presentation.
I agree with Dave.
Okay.
Here it is, and here's the sections, and maybe if there's a question there as to, well, here you have historic preservation, and I've been part of that, and I'll be happy to field the question and work to understand the question and what they might suggest as a change. For circulation or sustainability, we've each had sort of a focus, Pavlos and Jenny, if somebody says, well, you completely left out X out of the sustainability, and why don't you address this? Then you guys can perhaps respond and quantify the public comment at that hearing. That's how I see it going.
We'd also be,
Not that we stand up there and talk about each section, but when somebody says sustainability, then Pavlos or Jenny could respond to that, and we just kind of delegate perhaps those sections, issue areas, and not to exclude any other commissioner that says, well, I see it, but we would respond briefly at that, make sure we understand the comment, get the comment down, and then incorporate it or not later.
Yeah.
The other thing I think we're going to have to be prepared to do is inevitably somebody's going to raise a question, well, why aren't you doing such and such? And we're going to have to make a choice ahead of time. Are we going to be prepared to say, here's why that's not appropriate to put into a comp plan, or it isn't legal to put in a comp plan? Or are we going to say, give it a short description and then we'll take it under advisement? But we need to be prepared with how we're going to respond.
That's a
Form
great,
of
yeah,
the
great
response,
distinction.
yeah.
Yeah. What's everybody's take on that? In terms of,
Which would be something that we would publish when we announce the hearing.
Right.
Say, here's what we anticipate doing. If you say, we've missed this, we will attempt to respond briefly at the hearing, and we would prefer a written comment so that we can have the staff go back and review, much as they have, as to where the discussion occurred and how it was resolved over the past couple of years. Or we will, identify it as something that we never thought of. And now it's come forward. It's kind of the last minute, but it's valid, and we'll deal with it now, that kind of issue. So, yeah.
is everybody comfortable with that we do a brief response and then take that under consideration and include that in the review process? So it doesn't get involved in the kind of debate and discussion, but really just kind of here's what we were thinking.
Oh, go ahead.
I wonder if we have comment cards maybe available, and that way people can write down their comments and we can have it. That maybe there's some people who might not vocally say something, but would want to pass along their comment.
And accept email comment, perhaps, for people that can't attend to fill out a card.
I think we almost certainly ought to do that, given the number of comments we got from all of our open houses and focus groups, and people saying, we just can't show up at 7 o'clock or 6 o'clock on a weeknight. There were a lot of people who felt kind of
Left out because
You brought up.
I was trying to find a polite word.
You brought up the word debate. I think it should be far from that, because in the public hearing, we're asking them to make the comment, not us to refute what their comments were.
to defend themselves. Exactly. Good point. Yeah.
Well, very similar to the public meeting that we had with the old neighborhood folks.
Right.
I mean, we're listening.
Jennifer?
I wonder, too, with mentioning comments, I wonder if there is something in, whether it's where it's published, that this is going to occur, a public comment. I wonder if even online there's a way, if people can't personally be there, if they might be able to review the document and provide some comments.
We plan to put it up on the web, and we can certainly provide comment, say, send your comments to.
That would be great.
And
That'd be
we'll
great.
get your home email address. Life will be good.
Yeah, we don't have an interactive potential, unfortunately. They could respond directly, but we do have an opportunity for them to get back.
So that's sort of the form of the response. I think we've got an idea of what we want, and that we'll publish that. Staff can bring that back, but I think we understand. Timeline again. So have we got the pieces that you were suggesting?
I think so.
Okay.
Like I said, I'm concerned that we've got appropriate time to respond and react towards, anything that we see.
So
That we're not.
let's put some dates on there, can we? Realistic, if we're done revising on the 22nd, then, and that includes Civitas review.
We meet on the 28th.
And that's correct. So you get, okay, so Civitas has their input to you before the 22nd.
Right.
Okay, and that's doable. Great. Okay. Is there another piece of that that you identified that occurs before then? How about those test cases? Are we where do we work those in?
I would think part of the discussion on the 28th, we could have that in terms of, just a couple simple.
I think also, I mean, we have talked to Jan about both Nevada Place and Merle's, which were the two that you brought up. I think that she could do a synopsis of that and email it to you, so that then we don't have to take up a lot of time here going over what it is.
And so that would be,
That would be sometime before the 28th, so you'd have a chance to look at it.
okay. That sounds good.
So then, based on our comments on the 28th, and we will, you guys will update the plan based on that, and then we'll be ready to get it out get the draft out to go online. Okay.
So our first meeting would be, scheduled in March. We seem to have had a struggle to get extra meetings here in this month, other than this one, which gives us our two. But do we want to meet on March 7th? We've got 7th, 14th. I got the right month? Yeah, same dates as this month. How about that? Okay. Can we look that far ahead and say, we want to add a couple meetings in March?
To do what?
Whatever's necessary at that point. We've discussed.
Cancel them if they're not necessary.
Yeah.
Could do that.
Well, it seems to me if we put it online after the 28th for public consumption and review and comment, that a week is not enough to get any meaningful responses that we can then digest. And so it seems like we would want to wait that 2 weeks to incorporate discuss public comment, incorporate the.
And we have kind of a hole in here, too, because if we've got the 28th for your comments, and then we need to update that with your comments. So there's some time frame in there somehow. We update. Have a final we can actually put online. So we're going to probably need at least a week, I think probably at least until that first week in March to get it ready to go online, I would think.
It goes online March 7th, and then March 14th, we've got another meeting. When it goes online, mention that.
Reasonable?
Yeah.
That work for your schedule too, in terms
Yeah.
of when you're here and stuff too, so, okay.
When will the turnover be for the new people?
First meeting in April.
First meeting of April?
We would want to have planning commission vote on it the 28th of March.
Yeah. No later.
So we're only going to leave a week between publishing it online and having the public hearing?
No, I think I guess what I was thinking is by the 14th, we'll review based on that online update, and we will perhaps have some comments, but our public hearing would be.
Well, although, I don't anticipate that, with this, and Sarah Jane, correct me if I'm off here, but I would think you've got your draft, you're getting your online comments, but this is really more getting people ready for the public hearing. So we're not going to come back and make those changes before the public hearing. Rather, you're giving them time to get ready for that public hearing. So they've got an opportunity, and if they want to send stuff in before that, that's great. We can build that body of stuff. But to some degree, I think you'd want to wait until the public hearing to really start taking in that public comment. So you've got it all in one space, at one time.
And that was what I was getting at. If we're not making it available to the public on the 7th, having the hearing on the 14th, having the hearing on the 14th doesn't give them enough time.
Right.
Our meeting to discuss it on the 14th doesn't give us anything to discuss. That almost says the public hearing has to be on the 21st to have the 28th left for us to do whatever we're going to do with all the feedback we got in order to get the final copy to the
Vote on it.
board, for the city council.
And I believe Historic Preservation Board is going to meet on the 21st, so they'll be in here. We have a logistical issue with Doreen needing to be two places, so cloning Doreen to take notes for us as well as for here is going to be the issue, I think. So we'll figure out how we do that. So we may be able to get somebody else to
I
help.
would ask the council if they'd like to have that done.
Yeah. So that would mean on the 21st, we meet in City Council chamber. So with a public hearing, they'd be in here, so.
Yeah, which for a public hearing in the city council chamber, I think, is workable.
Yeah.
HP board is not televised, but that squeezes it in. We threw down an anchor, and we've got a timeline that is brisk. You guys are going to have to keep up.
Yep.
I think it's time.
Yeah.
All right. Did we,
So then what are we looking at? A general target for the city council meeting?
City Council
Like,
meeting, we're talking about, sometime in April, if we're having a public hearing on the 21st, it could be anywhere from, whatever works for their schedule. So I would think anywhere from probably the middle of April would be the best in terms of additional comments. That does, okay, I guess the question I have then is, okay, so we've got a final on the 28th, going online at the 7th, public hearing on the 21st. Do you want to do some presentations in here? Do you want to go to historic, the dilemma with that is going to be that Hoodlum, for example, meets on the first Wednesday of the month. Anybody have a calendar? You look and see when that is for March? The 9th?
No,
No, second. Second, so,
so it's prior to.
yeah.
I think we should invite them to the public hearings.
And not have a
And not do a
presentation for
specific
any special group.
presentation.
'Cause-
Yeah.
And that's kind of where you've been heading, is that you've had that outreach, and so this is the real opportunity for them to get together and have those comments. Okay, good, okay, good. Okay.
now, one further question then. I think perhaps this makes it difficult to get the council meeting public hearing published in the Littleton report.
If
We
we,
can talk to Kelly and see how that works.
yeah, what we would do is anticipate
Right.
that mid-April, we'll look for a date, see when we can schedule it. The due is March 1st. So we'd have it in on March, we just have to have it scheduled before, that first week in March usually. So we'd have to have it scheduled before then, so we just know what it is, so we would just put it on and get an article in at that point. And we can always include, a check back too, check back just to make sure we're there, but I think it's good to have that kind of pressure, to be
I
there.
like that.
Okay.
And one more thing that I thought might be interesting to go back to is look at city council direction against the draft to see have we really met what their direction has been.
We've been actually doing that as we go along, so I think.
You could include for us,
We can include an analysis of that, absolutely, yeah.
say, here's what we did, and particularly these last few edits occur.
And maybe throw that out on an email to us, so we can review it.
Is that a good way to,
That. On the 22nd.
take a picture of that?
I'll try to.
One other place that could be good to post is, or to write just a little verbiage, an article, is Your Hub,
Good idea.
because that could be great to put it in there as well. Just, I think, any way to get it out there to the citizens via different modes, I think will be helpful, will catch more people.
In both
depending
your
upon
hub
what
and
they
also
read.
the Littleton.
Yes. Yes, I figured that would probably be already in.
They've been very responsive to this.
Great.
And then Kelly takes care of those aspects of it. Does she do the Year Hub?
Kelly, yeah, I think she probably does, although we've had direct contact with reporters as well in all these cases. So.
Okay. All right.
Was Kelly still doing a review of the document? I think at one time we said she was going to be doing sort of a peer review of it, or...
She was going to be looking at doing some of the editing, but I think we're going to be doing it otherwise, just because of her schedule. So.
Linda,
No more comments?
works? Good, thank you. I think that was good. We also took care of one of the later items, which was scheduling upcoming meetings in that, kind of wrapped them all together. Okay. Questions for the Planning Commission? We had 2 left from last time. And I'm going to jump down to item C, and this is one of the new ones. I'll read it, not that we'll start here, but I wanted to get these in front of people. Julio is suggesting we change the maximum height to a standard 40-foot throughout downtown, with the exception of the old downtown neighborhood. It's another item that we want to try to get to tonight. Steve is suggesting that we need more in-depth discussion concerning the high, medium, and low densities as they relate to various districts. We discussed this a little bit last time, and I think somebody said, Julio said no, and we kind of set it aside.
We had actually voted, on it.
Did we? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Then there's that. That was item D. Sustainability. Jenny and Pavlos have investigated sustainability. And on the second and third pages, there's some notes about how to incorporate that. So we'll look at that as item E. And then the last item for tonight that we would like to get to is at the end of the last meeting, Jenny, Pavlos, and Dave raised the issue of solar access. Do we want to include guidance on solar access as part of the comprehensive plan? That gets wrapped up in height limitations also to some extent, and step backs and so on. But okay. With that said, now let's jump back to item A, which is a continuation of one of the questions from last week. Should the city work with the private sector to finance amenities that enhance livability downtown? For example, sidewalks, lights, benches, trees, parks, etc. And
I don't remember whose question this was. Do you, Sarah Jane, in terms of
I
one
think
of the
that
comments we had?
as we were going through it, I mean, it's very typical to say that these often go in as redevelopment occurs, which means that the private and the public sector are both contributing to it. And I think that that's the way that you have done it so far. But we never talked about it. So Dennis and I included it without talking to you.
Well, and I think the other option is
So that's why we brought it up.
other retail districts have gone a little bit beyond that. They don't wait for individual development projects. They actually, as a group, as property owners, say we're going to form a special district to either do special improvements or improvements and maintenance. Is that something that you want to recommend? We've made it pretty generic so far in terms of what the recommendation is, but that's an option that's open to people and something that we see fairly typically in terms of how we actually finance this. It's partially city public dollars as well as private sector dollars from the property owners themselves, and so it's that combination. And so that was, I think, kind of the question came up. How far do you want to go?
2 aspects I can think of offhand. I think we brought up the issue of more playground equipment in the parks and the open space downtown, and so that would be one area. Craig, I think it was, brought up something about a public open space, which presumably would be more workable, more friendly with benches, things like that. Some of the amenities that we listed here.
And some of these things, if the city's going to provide them, like facilities in the parks, or the Parks District does that, it's more in a residential area. The time you get in the residential area, that tends to be the public sector that does that. The only time I've ever seen, I think, really, the private sector getting involved is in the commercial district. So that's a different type of improvement. Often they get into a higher level of maintenance, a higher level of operational facilities. So there's a base level the city provides, and the private sector comes in and provides a level above that. So I think that's what we see in a lot of cities, small towns and cities around the country. So.
I think historically the city has relied on private development to build a lot of the, at least the back of curb improvements, and with resources at the city level, if anything, getting tighter, it seems like we should encourage that type of partnership. I'm not sure how far the comp plan can or should go to that to that realm, but the idea of a special district, business improvement district, that type of thing certainly it works in a lot of other places, and I think we should encourage it.
About something, I don't know if this is workable because it just popped into my head here, but if the required open space in a development project is accessible from a right-of-way, the city will provide consideration for benches and amenities, something along the line of, lighting. Maybe they add another Sternberg light in a courtyard or something, as opposed to an interior courtyard or, open space involving the project that's inaccessible to the public. Maybe that makes the projects more friendly. I'm just poking around here.
Yeah, I think those are good examples. I'm not sure, as Craig was kind of leading to, I'm not sure how deep we need to go with the language in the comp plan. I think language here is the city will work with private sector to finance amenities and enhance livability downtown. Is that specific enough? Do you want a little bit more direction? And do you agree with that? I guess the first question is, do you agree that the two should work together, that there should be a cooperative effort? And then,
Cooperative financial responsibility is really the
I'm sorry?
A cooperative financial responsibility is the crux of that question.
Right, yeah. And if you agree with that, without having to specify what that means, you want to leave it at that level, or do you want to go farther? But I think we even had a question whether there was support for that, because I think, so that's the first question we want to say, is there support for that cooperative effort with some shared financial responsibilities?
I would say I'd use the language continue to. They do the flower baskets and so on, planters, there's the little banners on.
Well, I'm seeing it kind of go the other way. I think, in my mind, Littleton probably goes farther in terms of the city's involvement financially, particularly with Main Street and downtown, than any other city I'm aware of. Most of what you see in Littleton in terms of the Christmas lights, the trees, the planters, has some participation by the private sector. The property owners are participating in almost every other city. This is unusual in terms of saying the city really has stepped up and said, we're going to do this. So I guess the question is, do you want to say we really encourage the private sector to step forward and take part of that financial responsibility, or do you want to leave that with the city? I think is kind of the bottom line for it. So.
Commissioners?
It just seems like too much detail to put into the comp plan, and if we really want to get into the financing of downtown, I think that's very elusive and it's very difficult to quantify, and they still have some kind of financial responsibility in the planning process. So are we getting too big brothery?
The other thing to think about is, how are we going to extend this to the rest of the community? This isn't just the downtown. It isn't even just the Main Street. It's the whole community. It's taken on a lot.
Yeah.
And you're right, it's becoming very intrusive on a lot-by-lot basis.
Got a motion to, or would you just like a show of hands to not include any kind of statement like this? I think
I'd further state that I think the language that's already in there is sufficient.
Okay. All right. So we kind of leave it as it is instead of asking for more private sector finance.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you, Commissioners. That's item A. That was the confirm. Item B.
You're never going to leave me alone, are you?
Never know.
Someday. Confirm the goal for dispersing rather than clustering various housing types. The current goal reads, affordable workforce, senior, student, and other housing that targets specific residents should be integral to the overall housing scheme and not set aside in clusters. So do we like the current language?
And concept.
Sure. Okay. First, do we like the concept that we're going to disperse that? And is the language good, David?
So what does that mean exactly? Does that mean the Development Review Committee and Planning Commission is going to reject any proposed development that's sited adjacent to a similar use or type?
No, I don't think so. I mean,
Right,
I
so
think
then what does it mean?
I think it's encouraging people to disperse as much as anything, yeah. It doesn't do more than that, really, it's true. And that's the dilemma with it, I think, is you really can't get much more detailed unless you get into zoning changes or something else, which would be really hard to do, so,
Well,
yeah, I think.
And the piece that comes with that, because we have policy and implementation, and I'm just going to take this from memory, but basically, the concept is that if somebody comes to you and says, look, we're going to take this entire block, we're going to take it out, and we're going to put in student housing on this block, that's a cluster of student housing or a cluster of senior housing or a cluster of, and I think that what this is saying is that we prefer not to see that.
And you could take it a step further in terms of, you could start saying, okay, if that's our goal, if that's our policy, then we'll look for ways to say it has to be a certain percentage of this, or you have to break it up. So there are ways to do it if you want to do that. You could get more regulatory.
Is this also saying that we won't take all the single-family housing, which is like in the old town neighborhood, and we're going to disperse that around the whole area?
No, you could actually exclude, with that area, you could even with it, so in terms of that really is a single-family area, a single-family character area that we.
Because that's our cluster of single-family homes right there.
Yeah, we'd probably want to exclude that from this, I think, if you want to do this. Good point.
Dave?
I just don't see how you're going to do it. Encourage doesn't mean diddly, okay? It doesn't mean anything. If there's no give back, if you're encouraging a developer to do something and you're not giving concessions, incentives, trade-offs, whatever, it's just jawboning. It's just talk. It isn't going to do anything. So if we really are keen on doing this, recognizing that we're not dealing with a huge area. I mean, clusters around here is two housing types on the same block. I mean, we're talking about a 12-block area?
Yeah, and the concern I think we heard was, the concern about too much senior housing, and it was what we really heard. And so we're trying to figure out how do you respond to that. Again, because of that, because how do you do it? So, yeah.
And then there come definitions. Although one thing I'd like to, we can strike student right off. Does anybody remember what we heard from ACC? They are not looking for any student housing around the college. It's not a big deal for them.
Right.
They're not looking for resident students around the college.
The only caveat to that is that we've started to see some private sector student housing in other places.
Right.
Yeah,
So how are we going to define affordable and workforce and senior? Is senior retired, over 50, 55, 65, 60? Partial care, care available, no care, independent living?
Definition of clusters?
Well, and definition of clusters too. But I mean definition of those housing types. What's affordable housing?
Let's look back. One of the biggest sections redeveloped was St. Mary's, which went to Nevada Place. And I think what you see is developers have a product that they know how to build, and they want to build that. And so if you tell them, we'd like to see you put a few student economy studio apartments, and then you can have some luxury apartments, they're going to say, well, we don't really do that. The senior housing people, they'll do, like across the street, what we approved and wasn't built. They do a piece, and that's all senior housing, which provides amenities that the seniors want. I would take that out.
I think like most things, we'll find this is market driven, and unless the city gets very actively into all aspects of housing, it's really tough to really control.
And you certainly, have the option to say, we don't want this.
Right.
And that's, we were responding to what we heard in discussion and bringing something forward. And if you don't want it, just take it out.
If we don't want it, if we don't want a particular kind of housing, we need to say so in comp plan. We can't wait until somebody comes in with an application. What we've been trying from the beginning in response to public comment was to get away from what appeared to be arbitrariness, unpredictability, protracted process, and negotiation. If we're going to take a stand about one kind of housing or not, or clustering housing or not, we need to say so and give it some teeth, or we're wasting our time and future property owners' time in applying for a development.
So, Pablos, I'm sorry.
My apologies for being late work issues. And hopefully I'm not replicating, duplicating anything that's been covered. To me, in that goal there, two issues when I'm reading it. One is whether we want to encourage, and I recognize the concerns with that word, certain kind of housing. And the second one is the not set aside in clusters. Frankly, given the size of the area that we're talking about, clustering is not a concern for mine. It's just like, cluster what? I mean, downtown is a cluster in like a Manhattan island scale.
I think that was David.
Yeah, and I just want to reinforce that. Now, a couple of things, however, that I see. Encourage is a vague term that doesn't mean anything. But there are a couple of ways in which, short of handing out concessions or incentives, we can look at this. One is, are there currently any obstacles to that kind of housing that we should remove? So if we say we're encouraged on one hand, but we're making it difficult with the other. The second one is, and I'll bring an example that obviously I don't necessarily think is the best example, but because it's worked. One of the things that we heard a lot around the time of the Walmart as to why the Walmart application came in is because there had been a council retreat, or maybe it was a Business Industry Affairs retreat that basically called for one, for something like that. So there is some precedent, maybe not the big, again, from my perspective, not the best example, but there is precedent of inviting something. Now, we cannot necessarily make it happen, but I think that being clear as to what we want to invite and making sure that there aren't any things in the way of that happening is within the purview of the comp plan, if that's the direction we want to go.
And the other thought I had is, one of the comments that we had, a couple that had real concerns about this, had been to a community in the Midwest. And it was everything down. They had a wonderful downtown. They invested millions and millions of dollars in the downtown, and almost all the housing was senior housing, because the housing authority saw this beautiful opportunity, and so they put. So, not that our housing authority would do this, but if we were to have a huge shift in the housing authority board and they started seeing this opportunity, do you want to have something in here that at least provides that kind of direction, so that you say, well, that's really not what we had in mind for downtown. We really saw this diversity. Or do we have enough of that other places that we really talk about the diversity of what makes it active downtown, and you've got that enough in the vision and enough other places you don't need that. So that's kind of the worst case scenario that I can't imagine happening.
I move to exclude Section 3B from the downtown area comp plan.
Second that.
Okay, move to second it. Discussion? Jenny?
And if this is taken out, I would hope that there be something in there that talks about diversity of housing to encourage so that we can have residents of all different backgrounds and financial backgrounds be able to come, and even size of families to be able to come and live in downtown Littleton, that there's options available for people.
Yeah, totally.
We do have that, and we'll check it.
The one thing that we have heard repeatedly throughout the city is that we want to encourage more families. So it is, if we are to encourage or invite anything in the downtown area, I would like to see an emphasis on family-oriented thing. So other than that, I concur with what's been said.
I guess I support your motion. I think this is better placed at the citywide level than the downtown level because of the limited size of the downtown. All right. Anything further to discuss this? All those in favor of the motion, which is to remove 3B, I believe you cited, which is this language from the downtown section. How about just a show of hands? Got 4 or 5, everybody but 1. So that moves forward to remove it.
Can I ask why Commissioner Coronado didn't vote for that?
Oh, I really just don't have a problem with the statement. I agree that it doesn't have a lot of teeth, but I think it's a worthy goal, and it's consistent with what we've talked about in the comp plan.
You'd support it at the citywide level then, assuming that it's okay with you here? Okay. All right, that's item B dealt with. Item C was from Julio last meeting, suggesting that we change the maximum height to a standard 40 feet throughout downtown, with the exception of the old downtown neighborhood. Any thought or
I've got some background if you want it. I do have, again, just the maps of the heights that you did agree to, and also the height of the existing structures in downtown.
one of the questions that arose regarding height was the height of built at Alexon, or what was allowable there. That sort of came into play with the consideration of the industrial area next to it. And so that's, I think, a question that was on the table. Maps once again.
Question, did we vote on this?
We did vote on this, yeah, we sure did.
Yeah, these estimates, which vary, they step up and down. That area we discussed was 50 feet on our maps. We probably aren't projecting it. There's the old downtown neighborhood, the single-family housing is basically 35. They want 30. I'm just reading from the map here. Along Prince Street, 45. This is all north of the downtown, north of Main Street. And then a 50-foot as you get closer to the railroad depression along Main Street, 40 feet. And then again, stepping upward as you go further south from Main Street along Alamo and along Little Creek, 45 feet. And then when you get closer to Arapahoe Community College, those few blocks adjacent is 50 feet. So we kind of have some variety.
For the purposes of facilitating the discussion, making a point, I will make a motion that we change the maximum height throughout the downtown study area to a standard 40 feet, with the exception of the old downtown neighborhood, where the maximum height will remain at the current 30 feet.
The other thing I'm passing out, and I apologize, I didn't have enough copies of this. The printer ran out of
I'll second that.
something before I got there. But this is these are the studies that Dick did that show height in different building types in downtown. This is what we did February of last year.
Okay.
So if you guys can share to.
Again, the purpose of it was, since there has been a decision before, I wanted to put it formally as a motion, and also to add the limitation to 30 feet for the downtown Hilton for the purposes of discussion.
So your motion was 40 feet?
My motion is that we change the maximum height throughout the whole downtown area to a standard of 40 feet, with the exception of the old downtown neighborhood, where the maximum height will remain at the current 30 feet.
Which is different than what's showing on here.
Yeah.
We haven't changed
Absolutely
this yet.
correct. That's why I'm
Also-
making it as a motion, because there's ambivalence as to how much that has been decided or not, and Steve seconded the motion.
And the other thing is, if you look in here towards the back, is original heights that we started with before we amended it, which is here. So typically, like 10 feet higher, I think is what we started with.
So how would this impact what has previously been approved to 50 feet?
If it's been approved at 50 feet, then it'd just be non-conforming. So, in effect, and because we'd be doing it with design guidelines, it wouldn't even be non-conforming because it's going to be a PDO. We went above the height. So we'd be okay with it. It just would change the design guidelines, and they would not conform to the design guidelines, but they'd be okay.
Are we open for discussion?
Yes.
Okay. I'm fairly concerned about just saying flat out that we're only going to go 40 feet, because I think there's a lot of opportunity of what you can do with the design to make a scale, to make it feel pedestrian scale. I mean, there's a lot of things that you can do, and to flat out just say it's going to be 40 feet across the board. I think one of the great parts about Littleton downtown is there is some variation. But I think, in general, I don't think we're looking at substantial variation of the city, of having high rises. So I think we pretty much agree that that's not where we're not looking at really building upward per se, but I think there should be some allowable opportunity to move a little bit up, a little bit down, depending upon the area. And the areas where there's more transition, especially along the railroad tracks, I don't have a problem going up a little higher and giving a little opportunity to do some more variation. So I think just going 40 feet, I think we're really kind of cutting ourselves off of some opportunities, and even looking at this study and what different heights. I mean, there's some apartments in here that are 3-story, even 4-story, that there's different things you can do with balconies and setbacks, and I guess there's just a lot of things you can do design-wise to make it feel more small scale than just flat out saying height-wise we're capping it.
Anyone else? I kind of agree with Jenny. I like the variance, although in the motion, I like the part about the 30 feet in the old downtown neighborhood, because that's what we heard from the neighbors. And so...
30 is what it is now.
30.
Well, our map here that we just got says 35, so we're just, I guess we're clarifying the map, but, yeah. So, okay, we'd discussed and decided, I think, that this map with 35 on it was what we were going to use, even though it's 30 now. So that's revising this map. I believe the motion would revise this map extensively, 40 feet everywhere else and 30 feet in the old downtown neighborhood. And so I like this map, with the exception that I would change that 35 to 30,
And then what
along
about
the line of what Pablo said.
I would like to bring the idea up to Pavlos about splitting that motion in half and having the 30-foot be a separate motion than the 40-foot, the rest of the area.
What I would suggest on that, because an alternate motion could have been made, is that we adopt the map as we have on the draft in front of us, with the modification that the old downtown area is dropped to 30. If we like everything in this map, except we want it to go to 30 feet, that can be amended, that can be made as a different motion, in which case we simply vote on the motion that I made, defeat it, someone can go in, make a separate motion, and it get voted. I made the motion, and I did because that's exactly how we had it in the wording in front of us, and I felt that that's a good up or down, take it in, and I just wanted to specify the downtown neighborhood. And I believe, I won't speak for him, that Julio would agree to the 30-foot limit on that. I've never heard him speak against that. Personally, I find I agree with Jenny. I think there are some advantages to
Pablo, let me interrupt you then. Let's vote this up or down, and then if we get another motion on the table, let's discuss those heights. Is that okay?
Yeah, if you want to call the question.
Right, yes. Okay, so the motion is to have a standard of 40 feet everywhere in the downtown area, with the exception of 30 feet in the old downtown neighborhood, both those combined together. All those in favor of that? And that one fails. Okay, let's get another motion on that.
I would then move that we incorporate the map that has circulated in front of us with a draft of March 1st, 2010. Am I reading this correctly? With the amendment that the old downtown area has a maximum height of 30 as opposed to the 35 as listed currently on the map, and with and everything else remaining as is.
Second.
Okay, very good.
I have a question.
Yes.
Does the number 4 on this map represent the entire old downtown neighborhood, or was that line redrawn for the Nevada Place?
That includes Nevada Place.
Okay.
Right, that was the revision, I think.
since that, if I can just logistically, since we have talked about excluding Nevada Place from the old downtown neighborhood, if someone wants to make that as another friendly amendment, I would accept it. Because I had the same question that Greg did.
Which is what our framework map is.
Yeah.
Right.
What about the industrial area to the north?
Here it's listed as 50, right?
So that's north
Is that
of
what
that.
you're?
North of Prince Street, yeah.
Right,
okay,
and
north of
we,
Crestline.
that's something that we're going to be talking to Civitas about, because that was not part of this initial study, and I guess I would like to know if your idea of this motion includes the industrial area, which is not on this map, at 50 feet.
No, but like I said, if anybody wants to make some friendly amendments to that clarify the industrial area and clarify the Nevada, where Nevada Place is counted, I definitely.
I would like to make the friendly motion to take the Nevada Place out and put it in the midtown area like we do in the framework.
Okay.
I'd accept that. Craig, you accept that since you seconded it?
Yes.
And if someone wants to do the same thing for the industrial area?
The industrial, does that include the Alexan, the whole, everything up to Bellevue?
Yes.
I move that we extend the 50-foot height limit all the way up to Bellevue.
Yeah, we accept that as a friendly amendment.
Okay, so now what we have, I believe, is we're going to adopt this map, moving Nevada Place to agree with our framework map, and extending what's labeled as 1 here with 50 feet height limit all the way up to Bellevue.
Which would be the end, to include all the northern area of the study area.
That's the question, do you want to include this area? I mean, that in there as well, so, it's industrial plus Alexa, does that include this?
No.
So,
Well,
Right now, that's where we're talking.
yeah. Okay, so I heard a no, but our last amendment to the motion did include that. So,
That motion was to add the industrial, wasn't it? Because that's not in the industrial area.
No, actually, Steve, I was looking at the,
Downtown north, right. But I think this is the area that doesn't have any direction for it, so.
I was actually looking at this map that's in front of us, and everything above the Area 1, from there to Bellevue, which includes the industrial, but also includes other areas.
It would be downtown north industrial, and this is actually part of downtown.
okay, so
So at this point, the motion as it stands is that the 50-foot limit is for what is listed as Area 1 on this map, but everything, the totality of the area of the north. Now, that doesn't preclude anybody from making a different amendment that we can vote on first.
As I understand it, looking at Lexan is existing at 50, correct?
Steve,
What is, Dennis, what would be the existing height limits in that Benny's neighbor area right there?
It's zone B2, and.
There is no height limit in
Yeah, no height
B2.
limit with it, yeah.
There's just the setbacks and the 221 FAR.
So, yeah, there really isn't one there at this point. I mean, realistically, what people are looking at in terms of the market, it's much smaller than that, but, you know, what we've been seeing, so there isn't one.
would either the person who made the motion or the second like to suggest removing what's identified as north entry retail from that 50-foot height limit? That would take that little piece out. Is that what you guys?
Before we
looking
do
for?
that, can I ask a question about, as we have drafted the map and the motion exists right now, PDO still permits,
Well, this would actually, the idea is this would go, would be included in the design guidelines because it's only through the PDO process, you're right, that you can actually get a greater height. So this would give direction to the PDO process, saying, you know, this is your maximum height that you could give. So you wouldn't go to 100 feet, you wouldn't go to 65 feet, you'd go to what's suggested here. So it'd be incorporated into the design guidelines.
And would that make it, that just gives direction in the PDO process, or we will
No.
exclude it and that would be an
It's
absolute
interesting
limit?
because the design standards and guidelines are regulatory
Yeah.
as they are referenced in the zoning. So it can be a standard. And I would
Yeah.
think you'd want it to be a standard with what you're adopting here. I mean, there's another process to do that, so you'll have another opportunity to look at it. But that's what I would think we'd want to see is that as a standard for the design guidelines.
So
And
on a-
again, the other issue here, of course, is the design standards and guidelines don't go up there, which is why we're not showing it. So that's another recommendation we'll be making is to include that in the design standards and guidelines. So you've got direction for that, because right now we don't have any specifically.
So I'll be the devil's advocate here. I understand the 30 feet in the R5. Everybody does. That's what it is now. That's what the residents are comfortable with. That's what they want. And it's consistent for that area. I understand the 40 feet around Main Street because that's what we have now and that's consistent. And we know what we're trying to protect and defend in that particular character. I really have to wonder what our rationale is for playing with little lines on the map, 40 feet, 45 feet, 50 feet. How do you justify that? Where the zigs and zags go. I mean, it's not protecting views because the only view of the mountains you have is down Main Street while you're on the ground, and above tree height, you don't see it anyway. Tree heights and the two-story buildings already block it. So what is it we're trying to do with the 40, 45, 50 feet variations?
Thinking back, correct me if I'm wrong, but we talked a little bit, particularly near the southern end in the vicinity of Arapahoe Community College. We pulled those heights down, discussing from the Stern Park neighborhood and at this point, potentially the City Ditch Trail on the far side of the railroad depression. When you look out that way, you still see the Columbine Mill, and you do still see the mountains. So it's a viewscape internal to this section of the downtown area, but it is in that area regards view. In last meeting, I think Steve mentioned when they discussed Alexon, they were considering heights when you look from Santa Fe looking up. And so then, I don't know if that's really the view, but it's the presence of structures in that area. So those are a couple things that are factors in these different heights. And then going back to the original motion that we voted down, I think some variability is, well, variety is the spice of life. There's some different things, different heights allowable here. The design guidelines allow some consideration for sloped, for pitched roofs, and how those are calculated in with the heights. So this, to me, is going to give you more of a varied rooftop view, particularly from the east side of the railroad depression. Anybody else? Did I misstate my impression?
I think you're right on. I think there is also some provision for transition here from the lower at the downtown Main Street district up to the higher, closer in around the light rail station where it could support higher density, and perhaps around the civic government district where it can also has higher density.
Let me bring us back. Oh, I'm sorry, Pablo.
I was reviewing some of the stuff, and I recall extensive conversation on the whole issue with the map and the presentations and everything. And if I'm not mistaken, the adoption of this map was unanimous. Okay.
It wasn't.
So honestly, at this point, there is a part of me that says we voted on it. We had an extended conversation on it, and I think there are some adjustments that we need to make for the Nevada place and for the fact that there was very strong sentiment from the residents of the R5 of the old downtown area, and instead of just completely reopening the conversation. So that's a little bit of, because otherwise, we make a decision, we move forward, we make adjustments as are necessary, but if we're going to be reopening the conversation on everything, we're going to be back to nowhere. So that's my main concern.
Let me ask if someone either called a question or address that north retail area.
Can I suggest on the north retail area that maybe because there is, so what I'd like to suggest, considering that north area, that whole north area, everything that is not marked on this map, it's outside of the design guidelines, if we could just maybe take it back out of this specific motion and make a separate motion to consider the whole north, because we need to talk about incorporating in the design downtown. And that's a separate area that we haven't discussed. So maybe not, to take back kind of my suggestion of, if we're talking about, we have a whole discussion that we reached an agreement on this, we're making minor adaptations, I would almost say, can we take it back and say the whole north area, let's reconsider it separately?
Okay.
Yeah, I support that.
The north area, the industrial area.
Everything north of Prince Street that is not currently in the design guidelines.
North of Crestline.
Huh?
North of Crestline?
Yes, thank you.
Princess Lake.
North of the area number 1 on
Yes.
this map.
That is not currently,
You're talking two different things. You guys are talking north of the line that says Area 1. Dennis is suggesting that it also incorporate that existing retail area immediately north of the Essex, north of Crestline. So we need to get that clarified.
No, I actually, I looked at the area where Benny's is.
The triangle.
So, yeah. So just
Oh,
below-
sorry, you said
just below
Crestline,
that.
didn't I?
Oh, sorry, yeah. So Crestline, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, this Crestline, not this, you're very confusing, because there are two Crestlines. Right.
we're saying that any area that does not currently have any limits on the map in front of us is not included in this motion, and that we entertain it separately.
And that's the friendly amendment, so that's withdrawn.
So we just, yeah.
Okay. So the motion is to adopt this map with a change to a maximum of 30 feet in the old downtown neighborhood, labeled 4 here, changing that boundary to fit the framework, which involves moving Nevada Place. I think that's where we're at now.
Yeah, and basically, the motion is to amend the map because we've already adopted it.
Right, okay.
So the motion would be to amend what we've adopted with those two changes.
All right. Any further question? All those?
Call the question.
Thank you. All those in favor, show of hands. Got all but one, which we've got, how many do we have here? 7 here tonight.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, 6-1. Okay, now, do you want to address that area north of Crestline? Would you like that addressed?
Yes, please.
Yeah, can you,
And the East Crestline.
before what, I mean, if somebody has a motion that they can put out, that'd be further. But before that, I would personally be interested in hearing a little bit more about why that was not incorporated into the downtown design guidelines and what would be entailed in doing them, because I think it's a simultaneous process.
It was all industrial at the time, wasn't it?
I think that's correct, and I think because the property which is now Alexan was industrially zoned, I didn't think they anticipated that. Redevelopment didn't anticipate it being part of downtown. They didn't think of it as downtown, which I think with the residential going in there, it was quite a shift, and so the public process on that was pretty intense in terms of, is that something that the community supports?
And as a reminder, we agreed, I believe, at last meeting, that while we did not want to, we were leaving the industrial area as is without any clear indication that it should stay that way forever or that it must change. Therefore, the possibility of change is there. And so in that sense, and I'm kind of allowed, what I'd like to see is us writing in such a way that the design guidelines would apply to all the areas that are not currently marked industrial, and if the current industrial area is rezoned, that automatically the design guidelines would apply to that area as well.
Steve?
I'd like to make the motion that the northern, or that northern area up there, including the industrial, give it the height limit of 50, with the exception of the northern retail area, of having that area be 40.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, so you just heard it. I won't repeat it. Discussion.
Just question, can we point to where that northern retail is? Is it just that green area there?
No.
Oh, it's the, okay.
It's an area down right along Santa Fe, right below where Regal Plastics is.
And realistically, can they build more than 40 feet on that? Because that lot size is pretty small, and they wouldn't be able to
It is
build.
pretty small. I don't know if they could or not. I think given the parking requirements, it'd be tough. They'd probably have to structure the parking and do some other
They
things.
could always combine it with something else and then stack the 50-foot building right along Santa Fe.
Yeah.
Could I ask you if you would be willing to accept as a friendly amendment, and that those areas and those guys are incorporated in the downtown design guidelines?
Yes. Yes.
So I would make that as a friendly amendment.
Dennis, what do you think about that?
Incorporating the,
Those areas into the downtown design
Oh, absolutely.
guidelines? Okay.
yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great idea.
Right, any further discussion on that? I have, the motion is to include that area in the north, the industrial area at 50 feet, except the retail portion to the west of that industrial area at 40 feet, and to include those areas into the downtown design guideline jurisdiction. All right. No more discussion. All those in favor of that? Show of hands. And 6-1. All right. Thank you. We, I think, have just dispensed with another item. Yes. Item D, Steve is suggesting that we need more in-depth discussion concerning the high, medium, and low densities as they relate to the various districts. We had some discussion about this.
Yeah, we had the discussion last week, and then we had a very quick discussion, trying to get it done before the meeting ended last time. And we had a quick discussion about it, and we voted on it very quickly, and we voted it down, 4-3. And, I've, put a lot of thought to that over the last time. I was one of them that voted no. And with more consideration, I feel that I probably would have gone the other way around. So that would have changed that vote from the 4-3 against to 4-3 above. I've got the reservations on the draft that we've had in front of us on whether it has enough teeth or not for land use issues. And I feel that if we put some limits to a couple of these areas, then that would actually help with the teeth that this plan would have.
So you want to limit the density? Is that what you're saying in some of the
In
areas?
some of the areas, yes.
Okay.
Like, we had voted the way it was presented last time was that the old neighborhood would have the least amount of density. Midtown was the medium, and then, I don't know, whatever you call that part down in the red down by ACC was going to be
Calling all that
the,
Main Street,
was going to be the,
Lower Main Street District.
yeah, which, I don't know if that design of the question, we hadn't got into it too much on how much of that red it was going to cover. If it's just the area that in our map here in front of us that we've been using, if it's the 50 area, versus everything in there that I see as being the red.
Which I think was Area 6, if you can see it on that map, includes 45 and 50.
Oh,
Is that right?
6 and 7,
Is there 7 there?
I believe so.
Yeah, it's just faint.
Okay. It is faint. I'm still not picking it out. Very well. Okay. So we're going to reopen the density question. Pavlos?
I just want to reiterate the 2 points that I made last time in support of density things. One is that in the old downtown neighborhood, one of the comments that we have heard repeatedly was concerns about density, even when they were not necessarily articulated as concerns about density. I think the concerns were really about density as much, if not even more, than actual height, and that currently we're not doing anything to restrict density in the area. And the second is that I would like to see a proposal that does not simply talk about high, medium, and low density, but actually has numbers attached to it, that we specify low density means up to and not to exceed so many DUs per acre. Medium is from X to Y DU per acres, and high is from Y to Z. Set an upper limit, not just anything above that, but that we define some parameters. And until we do so, my concern is that we may not be voting on the same thing.
So is your motion to request staff to put dwelling units per acre on high, medium, and low density?
If it's not something that we can put together really quickly
You might think
here.
about it just in terms of this sheet again. This matrix has densities on it in terms of those projects. So you can kind of visualize what those are. For example, we have Prince Street Commons is 12.8 DUs per acre. The highest we have
Littleton Lofts.
is Littleton Lofts at 75, which has not been built. Main Street Apartments, which is built and has been existing for a long time, is 63 units to the acre. And I guess the important part here is to kind of think about this. If you look at Nevada Place, 38 units to the acre. The key thing is how big are the units to some degree. Main Street Apartments tend to be smaller apartments, and so you get more units, so you get higher density. So it's a combination of how many units plus what are the size of those units. So density includes both those.
And to what extent does our heights and our setbacks limit the densities in these
Currently,
areas?
through the PDO process, the CA, currently you can get up to 100 units to the acre. We haven't had anybody go that high. Littleton Lofts is certainly the highest we've seen with that 75 units to the acre, and again, that has not been built. But that was the highest approved, but the zoning actually allows up to 100 currently.
Do you recall what the current
Through the PDO.
average density is in the R5 area?
The R5?
The current, I know the maximum is much higher, but the current.
I would think we'd be probably at 7 units to the acre, something like that, I would think. With those 6,200 square foot lots, that tends to be 7 units to the acre.
So maybe a low would be, if Prince Street Commons is 12.8 DUs, a low could be a 0 to 14. Does that seem, I'm throwing some numbers out just to kind of see.
When you get
if
to
we-
townhouse units, you're talking 14, 15 units is a maximum for a townhouse.
Okay.
You get to stacked flats, like Nevada Place, your upper 20s, low 30s. So that's kind of what you're looking at for the different densities.
So 0 to 15 would be low.
Would be low. Uh-huh.
15 to 40?
If you want to go, if you really want to think about the old downtown neighborhood, you might want to keep it under 10. You might want to go down to 7 or 8 even, which is more typical of what you see in single-family zone districts.
Well, because that brings up kind of the other thing, and the reason why I wanted to go through the numbers is that maybe low, medium, high isn't what we're talking about. Maybe it is that we want to, the same way that we've assigned height limits, we want to assign density limits to each of the areas. And the more I look at the height limit map in front of me and the map over there, the more I realize that Nevada Place is not the only place where the two maps don't match with each other. And that's just going to be really confusing.
Sorry, what's the other question?
I'm looking at the height limit map, and I'm looking at the framework
Oh, okay.
map.
Okay.
And I think we have several areas in which the boundaries do not coincide. And I think that we need to remedy that.
What are the other areas you're thinking of?
Well, one of the
Like those
areas-
lofts or-
One of the areas would be like along Prince Street where it's 45 foot, where the Midtown area next to it is 50 foot. Another area is over there by where the Littleton Lofts is going to be. We've right along Santa Fe. We've got it at 45 instead of the 50. Instead of the because that 50 area is in there. But one of the reasons I think we had brought up at that time was we didn't want the 50-foot buildings to go right up to Santa Fe. We wanted to back it off of Santa Fe a little ways. So I don't think we're going to be able to make these two maps jive with each other.
And I would say I don't think we have to. Let me go to Linda. Linda's been trying to weigh in on density.
Is there another way we can limit density in the plan other than density units per acre?
Well, to some degree, height's going to do it, setbacks do it, yeah. I guess the question is, what kind of impact are you looking at? And they have different impacts. Height's going to have more of a visual impact, and although, there's an expectation, too, that you're going to have more intensity, more activity there, because you're going to have more people, and whether it's office or residential, you're going to have more something happening. Whereas density really talks about numbers of people, typically, how many people we have living there, because it gets into how many units do you have. And even if you have larger units, you may have more people living in those. Smaller units may have fewer people. So it kind of balances itself out in terms of how many people you're getting. But I think it really talks more about people, whereas height's going to talk about kind of visual impact and kind of how's it sense.
So do comp plans typically specify the density?
They can, yeah. Certainly, we've had them that do that, particularly when you get down to what this is. This is a neighborhood plan section of a comp plan, so you can get a little bit more detailed in it often.
I think actually I will take up on your earlier suggestion, Norm, and I will elaborate a little bit more. So bear with me as I articulate this motion, but I move that staff brings to us by the next meeting recommend.
And at this point, we will include that in the final draft. Is that right?
Okay.
Okay.
Recommend.
And then you can decide
You
if
can
that
decide
works.
whether you like it or not.
Recommendations for each of the areas where we have each of the height areas. That would include density, setbacks, and open space. And the reason for it is because I believe that to really look at height as unrelated to density and that setbacks and open space don't create issues. So effectively what I'm asking is that we look at each of the areas that we currently have agreed on the heights and come back with a recommendation of associated maximum density, setbacks, and open space for those to be incorporated in the design
Do you want
guidelines.
height as well?
No, height we've already agreed on.
Okay.
But I would say, let's stick to the areas that we have already designated by height. So for example, for the old downtown neighborhood where we've agreed 30, what maximum density, what setbacks and what open space requirements do we want to have associated? And when you provide us that with a comparison of what's currently permissible, just so that we have that as a reference. So that makes sense as a motion?
I think so. I think I've got that. Is there a second for that?
I'll second that.
Okay, so we've got discussion. Linda?
Setbacks in open space, since it varies by parcel, is that something that's going to be realistic to put in there?
Well, it's in the zoning. And so it's
In the design guidelines.
in the design guideline. It could be in the design guidelines as well in terms of what you want to do. So,
I think what needs to happen, Dennis, see if you agree, is we take a look at that, and if it looks like the setbacks and the open space is covered in the design guidelines, then we don't need to include it.
Well, yeah, you can say leave it as is, but I think that if we look at high-density open space and setbacks, then we're getting a little bit more complete instrument of what the look and the feel is going to be. You can, and that's consistent to the discussions that we had earlier, where we talked about increased setback for increased height and others. So if we look at it and say, what do we want to create in that area, the combination of those four will give us a better than, oh, well, we're going to permit this height, and then in an entirely unrelated conversation, we're going to impose that density, just to try to have a bit more, well, comprehensive approach.
Any other discussion? David?
Pablos, are you suggesting that they do that as a range or strictly as a maximum? Because if it's a range, then that's going to say, if somebody wants to come in and do medium density and a high density, you won't let them.
Right.
and that's
Yeah.
kind of where form-based zoning is going, where a lot of communities are going, is they're saying there is a minimum as well as a maximum. So you really start getting what you want.
I think we definitely, I would want them to come in and recommend minimums as well as maximums as they're appropriate. More of what I'm interested in is, let's look at those four characteristics in combination with each other instead of in isolation, because they do affect the overall feel. And if there is a attribute there that I missed, by all means, please, someone suggest it as a friendly amendment and add it.
That's great.
So, hang on just a second. You then, I think, were willing to amend your motion so that it's density in terms of minimum and maximum, and Craig? you-
Range, yes.
Yes, yes. And thanks for
And I assume those ranges can overlap?
Why not?
Yeah, I don't see any reason why you can't overlap or have gaps. You could clearly say that the maximum in some area would be 10 units per acre, while the minimum on another area would be 20. I mean, if just sort of what seems to be the best combination of those four characteristics to create the feel that we want in each of the areas.
Steve?
So if I'm, just before we get to the voting, and I don't get a chance to find this out, are we saying that in the high density area, that somebody wouldn't be able to come in and put a medium density type development in there? That they would have to throw in a high density, or they're not going to?
Or they may not be able to put in a low density, but could put in a medium or high.
Yeah.
So you might,
That's the information that we're asking them to bring back, and simply we're asking them to bring that information. Once they give us specific numbers, then we could very much look at it and go, oh, well, no, I know that's what we asked for, but that's not what we want.
That number is going to be put into our draft that we're going to have. So if we vote on that now and we vote strict, medium, low, high in the different areas, all of a sudden, we're going to be up there in front of the citizens. And
You have a chance to review the draft before it goes to the citizens.
okay, so that's
That draft will come back to us the 22nd, and then we'll discuss that with that draft with these numbers on the 28th.
For expedience sake, they will incorporate in the draft, and then we will vote on it like we vote on anything else.
okay.
You have language too.
All right. Okay. I just wanted to make sure that.
Yeah, I'm sure I missed a few things when I wasn't here, but someone will fill me in.
Any other discussion? I guess, to me, there's too many moving parts here. I am okay with the recommendation for density, minimum and maximum, including setbacks and open space, and to me, is trying to put too many pieces together, and I think those are covered in design guidelines and so on well enough. So go ahead.
Remembering, we have to keep reminding ourselves of this. We finished this comp plan update. It's implied that we are then going to go back and revise or propose revisions to zoning. We've essentially rezoned downtown tonight. And also going to go back and revise the downtown design standards and guidelines. So don't hang your hat on what's in design standards and guidelines, because they're going to have to evolve to comply with, to conform to what we're doing in comp plan.
Sure. Okay, any further discussion? The motion is that incorporated in the draft brought to us the 22nd is our recommendations for density, minimum and maximum, setbacks, and open space related to the height that we just discussed, the heights in the areas we just discussed and decided on. Did that get it close enough? All right. All those in favor of that, a show of hands. And that's 5 and 2 against. So, okay. Very good.
And again, just to reiterate, that's simply asking for some numbers to come back so that we have specifics that we can make some decisions. Then.
Okay. Sustainability, there are some pieces here. I'm wondering if we want to look at these. Well, let's plow through it. We've got just over 15 minutes. Let's see if we can get another one knocked off here.
We actually, if we can,
Okay.
we'd appreciate getting all of them done, so.
Yes.
Okay.
we can incorporate all.
You're going to have to move fast, guys.
My concern is that we had said that those will be provided in advance and people have a chance to review them, and we're not
That's correct.
doing that, so.
Let's take 10 minutes and see what we can do. Under the planning principles, added the item sustainability, which reads as follows: in order to preserve resources for future generations while meeting present needs, downtown will become a model for sustainability throughout the community. That goes into the planning principles. And then we have a section under goals, policies, and implementation strategies. The goal of sustainability is public and private sectors will work together to implement the sustainability principles in order to create a built environment that conserves resources and promotes green building. Then we have 3 policies.
Can I?
Yes.
There's, basically what we did when we put this together is we took the information that you gave us and started to look at what works in the built environment, what works in a comp plan. And so the first one is really about what the city can do in terms of its energy conservation, waste reduction, and those things that were in that list from the ecology report that you had looked at. The second thing is to monitor advances in technology and post them on the city website for sustainability opportunities. And the third thing is the Littleton Sustainability Awards program that we talked about. But this is, I don't want you to think that this is all of it. We also have incorporated all the way through Linda's suggestion that we take the principle of sustainability and we added to that all the other principles that we have, and we will annotate each policy that we have because they don't neatly fit into one category. So a lot of the sustainability pieces of this are going to be in other sections of the policy, like land use, economic development, connectivity, and those kinds of things. So that's the piece that you're missing as you look at this.
I think, for the folks at home, I was going to read those. I think you gave it that's a good synopsis. Any discussion? Looks like, okay, Linda.
Just on the planning principles, downtown will become a model for sustainability throughout the community. You know, I mean, is that too specific? You know, do we want downtown as a model, or what happens if another community comes up and they become the model?
Good point. Pablo, Jenny, we're having a,
I recognize the demands of time, but I will move that we postpone the discussion of sustainability till there's a more thorough opportunity for more thorough review and contribution to some of the elements.
is there a second?
Second.
All right, we've got a motion and second. Discussion, Linda?
The reason why I don't support this motion is that we need to see it as a whole, the whole entire discussion of sustainability as it comes out within the draft. So I would think it'd be easier for them to just incorporate what they have, and then when we see the draft, we'll see all of the details involved with it, and then we can make some comments and update what they have.
Further discussion on the motion to postpone sustainability discussion?
If the final draft comes in and includes this element, we can still discuss at that point. I find this, my concern is that what we have right now here is disconnected from the big part that it's supposed to be part of, so it's kind of difficult to envision what it is, and we haven't had a chance to review it. If for the purposes of time, we want to review the sustainability section as incorporated in the final draft, as opposed to another separate piecemeal, I could be okay with that. I just, having a discussion on this right now, I mean, honestly, I'm not really sure what I think of it quite yet. I need to see it both in a bigger piece and also examine it more carefully.
I think too, we just got this email to us, both Pablos and I, today, and so I think we were wanting to hopefully digest it a little bit before going in and making some revisions, and then hopefully opening that up for discussion. And I guess one of the things is if this is part of, maybe this gives us a little bit of time to provide some feedbacks before this ends up in the final that we're going to be reviewing. So I could definitely want to provide some comments on this. I think it's very simple, and I just wonder if it's included enough. I guess that's my initial, I don't know if that's, but yes, seeing it how it will connect would be great in the full draft to see if we've covered each of the pieces.
Okay. Further discussion. I've got both Craig and Steve. Steve, okay, Craig.
Yeah, I tend to agree with the issue of time and to move it forward. I think it's important to incorporate it in the final draft. I do feel that there's maybe something missing here, and I hope we can pick it up in this next couple weeks. My thought is, my look at sustainability has to do with the whole composition of the urban form of the downtown area, and so I think that by establishing targets, it's a very important part of it, but there's something that has to do with that's the whole prior discussion that we've been having about heights and density and mix of uses, and all those things play into a sustainable place. And so I think we're getting there, but I'm not sure it's there, so I think it's good to be asking those questions.
Steve.
Well, the way I'm looking at this is through this, Pavlos and Jenny have pretty much been our leaders in the sustainability category. And even though I feel the need that we need to be pushing on, if our leaders in our sustainability category is telling us that we need to hold off on this right now, then I would say I would back them.
Right, so you're in support of postponing this,
Yes.
which is the motion. Linda, again?
What about providing comments, like you guys providing comments back to them, and they incorporate it into the draft, and then we include it as a separate agenda item at the next meeting? So theoretically won't delay.
Yeah, I think to some extent talked about is your concern that we discuss this as part of the final draft is effectively friendly. I mean, I think we accept it as a friendly amendment, and therefore we're okay. Yes, let's bring in the final draft, because what's been explained too is that there's too many things about it that cannot be seen in isolation, and they really need to be seen as the final draft. So if we provide, you know, by all means, anybody who has any comments and suggestions to provide, but to discuss this in its totality. Sustainability is not something that can be discussed in a paragraph or two. It is how it ties in with everything. So that's the main idea.
Just one moment. I'm unclear as to whether there's a friendly amendment to include it in the final draft, or whether we're still primarily putting off the discussion until, and not including it in the final draft, putting off further discussion until you guys have.
I think we're putting off further discussion till we can see it both with additional comments and as part of the final draft.
So that's,
And
Does
the
that
commissioners
seem-
will provide comments back
Yes.
to Dennis.
okay, that's the motion. All right. And I don't think we've amended it substantially. Okay, David.
My only comment was going to be, other than S1 about the city taking advantage of opportunities, which is easily done. The city can make that decision, the city can do it. Some of the things like S1A is so broad and so sweeping. First of all, it's saying identify and target implementation actions. I thought that's what we were supposed to be doing here. We're postponing it again, putting it off, letting staff come back and do it somewhere down the line. All I'm saying is, when we come back for this discussion, and when we provide comments on what to do, let's come up with something concrete, something tangible, rather than flag waving.
And that's precisely why I wanted to postpone the conversation until we have something that is more substantial. Otherwise, it becomes, well, you know, is there anybody here that thinks that we shouldn't last till the end of next year? You know?
Okay, the motion is to postpone this, discuss it, and in the interim, comments from the commissioners, and then it won't be part of the final draft. We'll have a discussion before it becomes part of the final draft.
I thought
It would be provided as part of the final draft, but we will have a discussion on sustainability
As a separate agenda.
as a separate agenda item, but within the context of the final
Yeah,
draft.
the goal is still to keep something of this in the draft.
Yes, absolutely, so that we look at all of it, but we
Okay.
recognize that it will not be a separate section. We will see it as it is incorporated in the final draft.
We incorporate it, but we were postponing the discussion
Yes,
about it.
absolutely.
Any further. Okay.
Yes.
Anyone care to call the question? Any further
I'll
discussion?
call the question.
Very good. All right. All those in favor of what was just stated, vote hand, please. We've got that.
We have
Okay.
unanimous.
Our first one of the day.
Item F.
Our first one of the day is our second.
Issue of solar access. Do we want to include guidance on solar access as part of the comprehensive plan? And I would ask, then where does that go if the answer is yes? So if the answer is no, we don't have to address the second part.
Is that addressed in the design guidelines?
No, it really isn't. It's not in there at this point. And having been involved in that before, it's a pretty complex discussion to have in terms of actually how do you do that in a built area. It gets into fairly significant constraints sometimes in terms of what happened on adjoining properties. It doesn't get as much into landscape. I haven't seen that, but it does get fairly tough. We're fairly fortunate that we have pretty good solar access in downtown already. Most of our lots are going east-west, and so you have a south-facing side to the house. So you have that opportunity for structures. Main Street probably is the one exception where we have north-south. But again, we've got flat roofs, so you could probably put solar panels up there. So solar access, I think you actually get into it, gets fairly complex.
For the purpose of advancing that discussion then, and due to its complexity, I would advance the motion that as part of the update of the design guidelines, once the comp plan is adopted, that the issue of solar access be addressed as part of building form and massing.
I'll second that.
Is that the appropriate place to put that?
Typically, yeah, I mean, you could, because what we're talking about is bulk plane, which is kind of what's the form of the house, the form of the structures. It's probably the best place to put it. Some zoning categories or zoning ordinances actually have that included in the zoning, but for us, it would be the design standards and guidelines where you'd want to put it in terms of how you actually build and improve. I think that's right.
Let me jump in just for a second, and then Pablos and then David. The design guidelines aren't applicable in all the other areas of the city.
Correct.
Whereas we might want solar access to be a citywide item. Let me go to Pablos and then you, David.
I'd like to offer as a friendly amendment to your motion, Craig, that the comprehensive plan outlines in the land use section some broad principles of solar access, which are then to be fully defined in the implementation in the design guidelines. And the reason I'm doing that is so that we have something in the comp plan, because we're not rewriting the design guidelines right now, that identifies some broad principles that we're all in agreement with. And because I have done some research and I've sent some information, stuff like that, I've studied solar access, it is quite complex, and that we effectively defer the full details of the implementation in a later discussion in the design guidelines as where will happen, without having to, at this late of the date, go into all the intricacies, which could be a multi-hour conversation anyway. But we agree on principles and we agree on examining the issue, and we put it forward.
David?
I'm extremely nervous about the idea of advocating principles or issues and turning it over to the Development Review Committee or whoever is going to update the design standards and guidelines without giving them any principles. We're saying, oh, take up the solar access issue. What parameters are we giving them?
Well, I think that's the point, is that we do provide them with some principles. And if I'm not mistaken, the design guidelines are ultimately reviewed by the Planning Commission.
Planning Commission and Historic Preservation Board adopted the current.
Yes.
I would agree as a friendly, oh, I'm sorry.
Hang on just a second. Let me get Linda in.
Why can't we just say something simple like encourage the use of solar power? Why do we have to get into solar access?
Because using solar power has nothing to do with building form, placement, or otherwise. Solar access has everything to do with it.
I think, Craig.
So I would accept Pablos' friendly amendment as that we establish some broad principles to guide the DRC in development of design guidelines.
Okay. I think I've got that. I think Pablos.
I seconded it, yeah.
Right. And what you specifically suggested was outline some principles in the land use section.
Of the comprehensive plan, and
Maybe those could be identified also as a sustainability item.
and I looked into that, and we brought it up as sustainability. Typically, they are in the land use section. The city of Ashland, Oregon was like one of the first ones that did that. Includes it in their land use part of the zoning map, and I think so does the city of Boulder and other cities that are doing that.
Can we cut the discussion there and vote on the motion?
Call the question?
All right. Craig moved to put in the design guidelines issues of solar access. Pablos, as a friendly amendment that was agreeable, said also outline the principles in the land use section, and I think that's what's before us. So all those in favor of that, putting solar access in the design guidelines and principles of solar access in the land use portion?
Yeah.
We've got, okay, looks like that was everybody. All right. Did that get it?
We got there.
Okay. Yeah, it was. 5 easy questions. All right. No, that's all right. Any last item about next steps wrap-up? I think we covered a lot of that.
I think we did.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
We have to agree on next meeting date, right?
Okay. That's right. Last meeting, we had decided not to meet on the 14th, but however, the 21st is out. So we kind of went through a schedule with the next meeting, the 28th, with the materials to be presented to us by the 22nd. Is that agreeable?
Can I suggest that since we're only going to have one meeting, that we consider, if necessary, extending the time? I think that's something we need to kind of get into a meeting and just finish it.
Okay.
Because that's what we're, I mean, if I understand from other things, we're talking about having the final draft by the 22nd, coming in on the 28th, and at the end of the 28th, we have the final draft done and approved from us. And that's, I would argue that's kind of like the budget meetings the city council has had. That's not well.
Let's do this. In the first item at the next meeting, review and consideration of the revisions to the agenda, we'll entertain a motion to continue as necessary beyond the 9 o'clock. Okay? And we'll do it then.
So everybody can come to the meeting planning on staying late?
Wired.
Coffee, sleeping bag, the whole
And now,
We may be motivated if we know that we have,
we will become more
Here
motivated,
till it's done.
more tired as the night progresses.
then I move that we have a special meeting as a study session on Monday, February the 28th, and that staff is instructed to have provided us with copies of the draft final to each of the commissioners by Monday, February 22nd.
Tuesday, February.
Tuesday, February 22nd. Thank you.
Second?
Second.
There's a second. All those in favor?
Yeah.
I'm in favor.
Oh,
It's just, I'm just like, why do we need to vote on this?
how about on this?
Motion to adjourn.
I second that.
All right, thank you, commissioners. Thank you.